Okay, so today we're going deep on Power Query
All right.
in Excel,
Sounds good.
specifically looking at a function called duration from texting.
Interesting.
And, this is one of those things that,
Yeah.
if you just saw it in the documentation, you might just be like,
Right.
ugh, what is this?
I'm never going to use this.
Yeah, who cares?
Right.
But it's actually,
Yeah.
super useful
That's a good one.
if you work with time-based data.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So before we get into the specifics of duration from text,
Okay,
can you just give us a little bit of background on
Yeah.
what is Power Query in general?
sure. So Power Query is kind of like the
Yeah.
the prep work that you would do to get your data
Okay.
ready to be analyzed in Excel.
Okay.
So it's all about transforming the data and cleaning the data
Gotcha.
and getting it shaped in the way that you need it to be.
Like a personal trainer for your data.
Exactly. Yeah, it gets your data pumped up.
Ready to go.
So so where does this duration from in-text
Yeah.
fit into all this?
So if you imagine that you have like a spreadsheet
Oh.
and you've got a column
Yeah.
that has a bunch of different
Yeah.
time descriptions.
Okay.
So it might say something like 2 hours, 30 minutes.
Gotcha.
Or it might even have something like 15.15.08.1234556.
Right.
And, to Excel, that just looks like text. It
Yeah.
doesn't realize that it's...
Yeah, it doesn't know that that's time.
Yeah, it doesn't know that that's time.
It just thinks it's words.
Right.
Okay.
But duration from text will come in.
Right.
And it will translate that into something that Excel can understand
Gotcha.
as an actual duration.
So it's teaching Excel to speak time.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, cool. So in the documentation, it says that the function takes
Yeah.
text as nullable text
Okay.
and outputs
Yeah.
a nullable duration.
Right.
I'm not a coder.
Sure.
So what does that nullable part mean?
Well, the nullable basically just means that there's a chance that it could be blank.
Okay.
So the input text might be blank, or the output duration might also be blank.
Okay.
And that would happen if, maybe
Yeah.
you had a cell in your spreadsheet that didn't have any data in it.
Yeah.
Or if the function just couldn't understand
Oh,
the
that-
text that you gave it. Like
Sure.
if you tried to translate a word that didn't exist.
Gotcha. So it's like a way of handling
Yeah.
errors.
Exactly.
That
yeah.
makes sense.
Mhm.
One thing that I thought was interesting was that the documentation mentioned
Yeah.
that it could handle negative values. I was
Right,
like,
yeah.
negative time. What is that?
Yeah, so negative time is actually really interesting because
Okay.
you can think of it like if you're tracking deadlines for a project,
Okay.
and a positive duration would be like
Yeah.
the amount of time left before the deadline,
Okay.
but then a negative duration
Right.
would indicate that it's gone over the deadline.
Gotcha.
So it's a way of quickly seeing which projects are behind schedule.
So like a visual cue.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. So it seems like if you're going to use this function,
Yeah.
you're going to need to pay attention to the format,
Yeah, exactly.
the text that you're giving it.
Right, the format is very important.
What kinds of formats can it handle?
So it can handle a whole variety of formats.
Like,
So it can handle days, hours, minutes, seconds.
wow.
It can even handle fractions of a second.
That's pretty specific.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what happens if my data isn't perfectly clean?
Yeah. So if your data isn't perfectly clean,
Yeah.
then the function might not be able to understand it.
Okay.
So that's why it's really important to do data cleaning
Right.
before you start using this function.
So it's kind of like
Yeah.
prepping your ingredients
Exactly.
before you cook.
Yeah. If you don't chop the vegetables properly, then the dish isn't going to turn out right.
That's a good point. So it seems like what we're talking about here is this function's like
Yeah.
taking something that looks like regular text,
Right.
but it's actually like time information.
Yeah.
And it's turning it into something that Excel can actually use.
Exactly. And it's helping us to get insights
Yeah.
from our data.
So for our listeners out there who are, working with spreadsheets and dealing with messy time data,
Yeah.
what would you say is the biggest takeaway for them?
Well, the biggest takeaway is that this function is really all about making time work for you in Excel.
I like that.
So it's taking what looks like plain text
Right.
and it's revealing this valuable time data
Yeah.
that's hidden within.
Okay.
And then with that, you can uncover all sorts of insights.
Right. Yeah.
You can figure out where the bottlenecks are in your workflow,
Okay.
or if your projects are consistently going over schedule,
Yeah.
or if there are any patterns in your data that you haven't even noticed before.
Wow, that's powerful.
Yeah, and that's the real power of this function, is it gives you the control to answer those questions.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Thanks for walking us through that.
you're welcome.
I think our listeners are going to get a lot out of this.
Great.
And thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
All right. And we'll see everybody on the next deep dive.
Sounds good.
See ya.
Bye.